Now we are moving on to the next one, to the next session on due diligence and practical tools, which will be moderated by Mrs. Marina Schneider, Principal Legal Officer at UniDroit. And again, if you have any comments, questions, please use the chat function for this. So, Chair Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kirsten, and good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here with all our partners and to moderate this morning the session on due diligence. As it was already said this morning by Sophie and others, due diligence is really the core concept of the 1995 UniDroit Convention, because due diligence is a behavior, and we heard how museums are involved. They are in the chain of acquisition, and not only acquisition, but also they receive donations, and also receiving a donation, museums have to be very careful of the origin of the objects, and because the effects are extremely important. Not only, particularly when you speak about restitution, you have to return the object, but you will also lose, you will have no compensation because the burden of proof is on the possessor. And so criteria are given. It's the same in the 2014 EU directive. It's exactly the same concept. So it's important for us now in this session to understand how museums deal with due diligence and which tools, how technology can help to do this. Of course, not only policies, but guidelines and code of ethics. The most well-known of them is the ICOM code of ethics, and I'm very happy to welcome as a first speaker Andrea Kieskamp. You are an independent exhibition maker, education specialist and guest curator. From 2015 and to 19, you were secretary of the Code of Ethics Committee for Museums at the Museums Association in the Netherlands. You are vice chair of the Bew Shield Netherlands and work on a book on the protection of cultural heritage in the Netherlands in World War II. You are now going to tell us about how important the ICOM Code of Ethics for professional museum practice is. We may start with our panelists, and we will start with the first panelist, who is Maria Dahlström, with two rounds of questions. Maria is curator at the National Museums of World Culture in Sweden. She works with the collections for 4 museums since 2008. She's now focusing on questions relating to illicit trafficking of cultural property, provenance research, and repatriation. Maria has an MA in archaeology with focus on classical and East African archaeology. Maria, my first question to you will be, what does due diligence mean to you? And you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes, oh dear. Thank you, Marina.
To start with, we may, if we have more time, but in order to have all time of question. Thank you so much.
For me, due diligence means thinking twice and to question what is actually known about an object. And if there is anyone listening who's not a museum worker, due diligence is the research of the chain of events and ownership associated with a particular object, where you hopefully establish that it hasn't been stolen, plundered, or smuggled, as we saw in the previous video, for example. And you look at the object itself, as well as research archives and other places for old receipts, wills, export licenses, etc. And this should, of course, be conducted before acquiring objects to a collection or when choosing objects for an exhibition or a loan, for example. Andrea was going to talk about ethics, and I think that ethics, due diligence, and provenance research goes hand in hand, really. And it's really important that you implement these guidelines in your own organization. And we have worked at implementing them at our museums, which is the National Museums of World Culture. For example, we have had for several years now an ethics council that helps us tackle challenging and sensitive issues. And this past summer, thanks to the pandemic, we had an entire afternoon for the entire organization to learn about the ethics guidelines, ICOM's ethics guidelines, and to discuss how they are relevant for different departments, like how and what we collect, and how we present our collections and how we talk about them. It shouldn't be something that just involves the collection department. But also part of the due diligence work for museum is to review its acquisition policy. And there are two main reasons for this. The first being that a strict policy helps you avoid acquiring stolen or illicit objects, of course. And the second is that I believe that we museums should build role models when it comes to not being part of this illegal trade. And if we collect questionable objects, well, what kind of message does that send? And I'm skipping ahead a little bit. We have actually changed our acquisition strategy radically the past years. So we now avoid or actually completely stopped acquiring, for example, archaeological material, unless there are the right permits available. And as you know, most of the time there isn't any documentation at all. And to be honest, in the past, that didn't bother the museum. If it was a good example of a type of artifact or it filled a gap in a series, it had high artistic value, we would have acquired it for that reason alone. But now, since we're changing our policy, we barely acquire anything that is of age or that might be of cultural significance to a group or a person. Because today when we collect, we want to collect a story as well, not just an object. And as you know, archaeological objects without a context have lost most of its story. But you might add that an object might have been exported, excavated, or sold before any national laws were in place, so it might not be illegal. But I think, and my institution thinks too, that that isn't good enough anymore. And just because something wasn't illegal doesn't make it right. So we come back to ethics again. Still, if an object was excavated 150 years ago, or rather it was plundered, the object has lost its story. The same if a stone sculpture has been taken from a temple wall or a cave painting removed. Before any laws were in place, why should it be okay for a museum to acquire it today? We don't think so, anyway. But as you know, due diligence takes a lot of time. And I think that museums and other institutions with collections, they need to get better at sharing archives and making them available. As you were talking earlier about with CIDOC, that's very interesting work. And this requires resources on an international level, of course. And actually now here in Sweden, with the help of the National Heritage Board, we're about to start a provenance network to help each other share knowledge, archives, and good practices. We're just at the beginning of this. But when it comes to our own museum, here at the National Museums of World Culture, we have started a provenance overview of our entire collections. Not proper provenance research where you examine the history of each object. Instead, we look at the entire collections and grading them from unproblematic to very problematic, based on the knowledge we have of the kind of objects in the collection, as well as how they were exported, acquired, etc. So this is to get a better understanding what we have and also what we shouldn't have, and on which collections we should focus on for proper provenance research, and in the end, finding objects that should be returned. Because provenance research, the illicit trade, repatriation, it's all the same thing, really. But
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe I do apologize. Maybe we will continue in the second round, but thank you very much for putting our attention to due diligence and research provenance, which are not exactly the same thing, but are very important. It's important for us to understand practically how museums deal with those, and quite rightly, and we understand it changes also the way and the categories of objects to acquire, because we know that archaeology, and particularly because of illegal excavations, it's very difficult. You don't have documentation, of course, and as a museum, it lost its context, so also its importance. So thank you so much indeed. I don't know whether Andrea would like now to make her presentation, or if we go, let's have another try?
Yeah, I will have another try.
Okay.
I hope it will work now.
I'm sure it will. You have the floor, Andrea.
I hope so.
Yes, it's good. We see
oh
very
my
well.
God. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me as the Secretary of IC Ethics to do this presentation. I'm really pleased to do it. And with this presentation, I will focus on the importance of the Code of Ethics to daily museum practice. I will demonstrate the potential scope of the code in ethical dilemmas by using a recent example of provenance research in the acquisition of a collection. But first, let me take you back to 1945 and start with a small scene from a movie maybe some of you may have seen. And because of the copyright, I must ask if the recording can be stopped for a moment. Man, issued in 2014. And to be honest, the film was not so very good, I think. But this scene always touches me because it really communicates the importance of cultural heritage. Cultural heritage is about emotion, it is about identity. And Anna already referred to it earlier when she was talking about the council conclusion that, for example, it can have an important role in reconciliation. On this photograph, you see the real moment of discovery. Stephen Kowaliak, George Stout, and Thomas Carho transporting Michelangelo's sculpture, Madonna and Child, on July 9th in 1945. This Michelangelo's Madonna and Child was taken by the Nazis from the Church of Our Lady in Bruges, Belgium, and recovered at the Kaiser Joseph mine. These are 3 members of the Monuments Men Fine Arts and Archives section of the Allies, a corps of approximately 345 men and women who interrupted their careers as historians, architects, museum curators, and professors to mitigate combat damage. They found and recovered countless artworks stolen by the Nazis. The world wars had resulted in large-scale destruction of and illegal trade in cultural heritage. In November 1945, a big step was taken by the foundation of UNESCO, and a year later, the International Council of Museums. And the problem of illegal trade was an important motive for ICOM to draw up a code of ethics. And to give you an idea of the process that led to today's code of ethics, I will give a brief timeline. So just after the Second World War, in 1946, ICOM is founded. In 1947, we have a conference resolution on the illegal excavation and exportation of items of cultural heritage. It was already earlier mentioned by Sophie when she was talking about the history of ICOM. And the first landmark in the preparation of an ICOM code arose in parallel with the work towards the 1970 UNESCO Convention on the illicit transfer of cultural property. An ICOM working group drew up 20 recommendations to reinforce the international effort against trafficking. And this was seen as a first step in establishing a professional ethical code regarding acquisition in 1971. The ICOM resolutions on the ethics of acquisition and the documentation of collections and field missions. In 1974, ICOM issued a handbook of national legislations relevant to cultural property. And in the same year, working group starts preparing a comprehensive code of ethics. In 1986, a code of professional ethics was approved unanimously at ICOM's General Assembly. And in 2004, the current code of ethics for museums was issued. So this is the cornerstone of ICOM, the ICOM Code of Ethics. It sets minimum standards of professional practice and performance for museums and their staff. And to give you an idea of the scope of this code of ethics, I will show you the 8 principles. So the first principle is museums preserve, interpret, and promote the natural and cultural inheritance of humanity. Museums that maintain collection hold them in the trust for the benefit of society and its development. Museums hold primary evidence for establishing and furthering knowledge. Museums provide opportunities for appreciation, understanding, and management of the natural and cultural heritage. Museums hold resources that provide opportunities for other public services and benefits. Museums work in close collaboration with the communities from which their collections originate, as well as those they serve. The 7th principle is museums operate in a legal manner. And 8, museums operate in a professional manner. These are the 8 principles, and every principle has some articles in which this is further specified. Well, Sophie already mentioned that, for example, museums can be targets of theft. Well, that is one of the articles under the first principle, security requirements. But how do the other principles relate to fighting illicit trafficking? To make it clear that the Code of Ethics as a separate document and a minimum standard is only effective under certain conditions, I will address a recent request for advice from an archaeological museum in Leiden to the Code of Ethics Committee for Museums in the Netherlands. But before I do so, I need to explain to you how the Code of Ethics is implemented in the Dutch museum sector. The museum register lists all museums that meet various quality criteria. These criteria are summarized in the museum standard. Endorsement of the Code of Ethics is one of the basic principles of the museum standard. Only a registered museum can be a member of the Museum Association. The Museums Association facilitates the Code of Ethics Committee for Museums, which advises on specific ethical dilemmas faced by museums. The committee is led by a legal advisor and consists of expert museum professionals. If the Code of Ethics Committee makes a recommendation, the museum is not obliged to follow it. The Commission does not have the power to impose sanctions. But if the museum does not follow the advice, the Museums Association can, for example, decide to expel the museum as a member. At that moment, the museum may no longer receive visitors with a museum card, a discount card, which in many cases will lead to fewer visitors. Now let's go back to the Rijksmuseum van Oudheden, the National Museum of Antiquities in Leiden, the Netherlands. In 2020, the museum intends to acquire a collection of more than 400 objects, originating mainly from the Roman and Greek cultural areas. They have been collected over the past 50 years. And to be clear, the picture I show you is not the collection I'm talking about. It's just a very cool presentation of archaeology in the subway in Amsterdam. The museum considers it of great importance for the museum because of its composition, quality, and historiographical and educational value. So, to make the case a little bit more clear, It is about provenance research for acquisition from more than 400 items. The knowledge about the origin of most objects does not go back further than the previous owner. So this is the case with about 300 items. The 108 most important items are better documented. So the museum started provenance research on these most important 108 items. And they have no reason to doubt the provenance of these items. But the other 300 are also relevant. But for practical and financial reasons, it is impossible to do an individual provenance investigation. And the museum expects that the provenance of most items cannot be traced at all. So the museum formulates the following questions in its request to the Code of Ethics Committee. The first question is, does the Code of Ethics, under certain circumstances, offer the possibility to refrain from provenance research in full or in part when acquiring an object? And if so, under what circumstances or conditions? The second question is, does the code offer the possibility of settling for a provenance investigation which reveals an incomplete, unclear, or incorrect provenance when acquiring a property? And if so, under what circumstances or conditions? And the last question is, if the answers to questions 1 and 2 are affirmative, are certain special obligations or restrictions attached to the objects thus acquired? The code formulates general principles of due diligence in acquisition to prevent museums from acquiring objects that have been illegally excavated, acquired, or traded. So this was the first step the Commission took to look at these questions. And when we remember the 8 principles I mentioned, we have from the second principle, Article 2.3, provenance and due diligence. And this article says specifically, every effort must be made before acquisition to ensure that any object or specimen offered for purchase, gift, loan, bequest, or exchange has not been illegally obtained in or exported from its country of origin or any intermediate country in which it might have been owned legally, including the museum's own country. And then the most important sentence, due diligence in this regard should establish the full history of the item since discovery or production. The second general principle, Principle 4, gives an article on the display of unprovenance material, Article 4.5, and it says, museums should avoid displaying or otherwise using material of questionable origin or lacking provenance. They should be aware that such displays or usage can be seen to condone and contribute to the illicit trade in cultural property. The acquisition or display of objects of unknown provenance contributes to and is considered an approval of the illegal trade in cultural heritage. If full provenance is not possible, the standard from the 1970 UNESCO Convention usually applies. So then we come to Principle 7 of the Code, and specifically 7.2. The Code of Ethics stipulates that the 1970 UNESCO Convention is a minimum standard for museums. Antiquities imported after the entry into force of the Convention require an export license as proof of lawful origin. Since December 28th in 2020, a new European regulation has been in force. The regulation of the United Union 2019-80 of the European Parliament of the Council of 17 April 2019 on the introduction and the import of cultural goods.
Andrea,
Under these,
excuse me if I interrupt, I would ask you to wrap up and conclude because I gave you already more time.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
No,
I will go a little bit
sorry.
faster. Yeah. Okay, so the commission also checked some other questions. The civil code in the Netherlands, the red list, the United Nations, and were illegal traders involved? The final conclusions of the committee were, can we refrain from provenance research? No, this is not possible. The second, is it possible for settling for a provenance investigation which reveals in an incomplete, unclear, or incorrect provenance? Yes, but only as a safe haven. So this means that the museum cannot acquire this collection or buy it. It can just keep it safe. So I have shown you that a lot of principles are already used for only this example. But also the other, number 1 and 8, are also applicable to all kinds of ethical dilemmas connected with illicit traffic. Also within ICOM, illicit traffic is having a new step by IC Ethics that was started in 2019. And I want to welcome you to our website and to see our meeting room event on illicit trafficking on cultural property on the 1st of June 2020. And to give you one last conclusion, two things are very important when we're talking about illicit trafficking and the code of ethics. The first is cooperation. A sole document doesn't work. And the second one is awareness. And with IC Ethics, we hope to work on this awareness together with ICOM and also with UNESCO. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and apology again for having to be harsh. But thank you very much for this, for showing us how this code of ethics is really the cornerstone, as you call it, for ICOM, and also that it's not written in stone. We've seen with ICOM that this code of ethics have been revised several times because this is a moving concept. And when a specific situation comes, the code of ethics want to be or needs to be updated and is following. So this is extremely important. Also the practical use of the code in the Leiden Museum. And of course, the very important work of this, one of the international committees of ICOM we had before, the CDOC, now Ethics, of which you are secretary. So thank you very much, Andrea. And now I would give the floor to our second panelist, Darinka Kolar-Oswald, who is Senior Police Inspector, Museum Advisor, and Head of the Slovenian Police Museum. You hold a bachelor degrees in art history. You're working for the Ministry of Interior in 2000 as a criminal police inspector for the investigation of crime related to the cultural heritage. This is very important. We always speak about having specialized units also in this field. You've been the curator and head of the Slovenian Police Museum since 2011. You are going to present to us, to tell us about a very important ICOM instrument, the Red List. But for those who may not well know the Red List, could you please tell us what is a Red List exactly? Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I hope you hear me. I don't. Now
Yes,
I will share my screen with you, and I'd like to say that I'm honored to be a part of group which created the last and the newest Red List, and also I'm honored to have a chance to present our work on this meeting. So what is red list? The history of a red list dates back to year 2000 when ICOM, I think, find a new tool for fight against illegal trafficking of cultural property. This is not a list of stolen objects, but it's a list which help to identify what objects in one area, in one country, its cultural heritage. And about a red list, they are prepared on the same pattern. Now, the red list of Southeast European cultural objects, at least 18 in the line. First were prepared for Africa and Latin America, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so the pattern of the red lists are to put which legislation is important, so national and international, and then to point out about categories of art objects which are at risk on some part of the world, concrete as here in Southeast Europe. Fighting illicit trafficking of cultural property, it's someone say that it's trading in the soul of the nations. Nations lose really irreplaceable, invaluable sources of information on their identity, about their past, about their culture. And according to some available information, the illicit trade is in the third position when we are talking about money which are earned by such illegal offenses. And of course, the illegal trade is connected with many other offenses like thefts, like destroying of art, archaeological sites, also with smuggling. And cultural heritage crime has no borders. We can find it in every part of the world. And on the other hand, it's also, according to available data, the results of the working and fighting against such type of crime. Police is successful only about 10 to 15% to find objects which were smuggled or which were stolen from some part from some country, for example. So the importance of red list is really to share knowledge, to educate non-professionals what is the topic, what are the objects which they are looking for. And from my own experience, I can speak that also one of my tasks, now I'll speak from a point of the police inspector who, when I started to work on that working area, fighting against a crime connected with cultural heritage. One of my tasks in the beginning, so 20 years ago, was also to prepare some statistical data about criminal offenses. And yes, I found something about thefts, collect something about thefts, about damages, about no, the most that thefts and damages, but nothing I didn't receive from the units, police units, nothing, no data about smuggling across state borders. And it was really surprised for me that number was 0. Country which is near the ex-Yugoslavia, near the parts where the war was, and a lot of damages, also cultural sites and churches, a lot of things was damaged and also looted and so on. And it was really surprised. And then at that point, we really find out that, okay, who report thefts? The owners of the cultural heritage. Okay, they know what is the cultural heritage. Also, the damages, it was reported by owners. And then who report smuggling and illegal crossing of the state border for cultural heritage? Nobody. Really.
Darinka?
Yes.
Excuse me, it's difficult to be a moderator in the last session in particular, but we still have 2 persons to, and you are answering to the second question already, I will let you a minute and a half, but please no more. Thank you so much.
Okay. Just I would like to say that really important is education for non-professional. And after we started with education for these police officers, customs officers, then really we also prepare statistics about smuggling. Also, we found some numbers. Now, the red list for Southeastern Europe, I think that's it's important because cases are, but it's up to us to find it. And this group about creation of red list connect 10 countries, experts from professional from 10 countries. And first, we define categories of cultural objects at risk, and then we prepare selection of objects, and also about we prepare some text. And now the value of this preparing red list, I think, is also in creating network of professionals for some special area, and it's I think the main value. Value. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Darinka, and please, I apologize again. Now we're going to and thank you for answering the 2 questions. We're going to our third panelist, who is someone who will present to us another extremely important tool, as the red lists are, to fight against illicit traffic. It's Corrado Cattesi, who is coordinator of the Works of Art unit at Interpol. Corrado is Lieutenant Colonel at the Italian Carabinieri Corps and the Interpol Works of Art unit coordinator. As I said, he dedicated his last 16 years of professional experience in the fight against illicit traffic at national and international level. He's the Interpol contact point to coordinate the Interpol activities. Corrado, could you please stop sharing your the screen, Darinka? You have to stop sharing. And Corrado, please, you will give us, as Darinka was starting to do, some data on the illicit traffic of cultural property. You will tell us how Interpol is tackling with this crime. And you will, of course, present to us the new app that was developed, which is an extremely useful tool also to be put at the disposal of museums. Corrado, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Marina, and it's a very honor to be moderated by you. It's the first time. I'm very pleased. And first of all, allow me to thank ICOM and UNESCO to have this great opportunity to be with all museums officials, to share our experience, but especially to share with you what we are doing to fight illicit traffic of cultural property, because as it was told several times this morning, international cooperation at the global, regional, national level is the only way that we have to fight illicit traffic of cultural property. Now, for me, as you know me, to understand, to introduce what is it, how we should fight illicit traffic of cultural property, we need to understand our enemy. We need to understand which the dimension of the illicit traffic of cultural property. To do it, since 2016 in Interpol, we decided to send a survey to our member countries, asking them to give us data on the illicit traffic of cultural property, on offenses, number of stolen objects, and so on. And looking to the data received this year, but linked to the pandemic period, that means 2020, we received data from 72 member countries. And as we can see, because also I put in this slide the number of 2019, we had less offenses than 2019. And indeed, we were reported from 72 member countries, more than 9,000 offenses, instead of the 12,000 of 2019, were reported as stolen more than 35,000 objects, less than the 56,000 of 2019, but at the same time were seized more than 850,000 items. Also here we have less seized stolen items, at least 150,000 less. However, the number of the crimes committed against the cultural property during the pandemic, it means during the year where all people should be at home, is incredible. It means that the illicit traffic of cultural property is a real serious crimes that affect all countries worldwide. In talking about where the crime is committed, I will give you two data of 2016 and 2019, because every 3 years we go deeply with our member countries and understand the crime. And as you can see, this is the data, the pie of 2016. Most part of the theft, the best part were committed in the private home and in religious building. But this data in 2019 was the same for the private homes, but was what decreased for the religious building from 18 to 15%. But it's totally different for museums. In 2016, were reported thefts. Of course, we are talking only about the number of the countries that gave us number. It's not complete because some countries don't have national data, as it was already remembered during some previous panelists. And, but however, we had an increased number of 4% of crime reported against museums. It means that even if the protection of the museums are improving, we need still to do a lot of things. Now, talking about Interpol, according to the fact that the objects stolen are popping up in the market after several years that were stolen, we are talking about from 3 months to 20 years. In Interpol, in 1995, in the same year of the Drug Convention where it was issued, we issue our first Interpol database, that is the Interpol database for stolen works of art, that is considered by the monitoring team of the Security Council as a key tool to fight illicit traffic of cultural property. And we have more than 52,000 items recorded in our database coming from 134 member countries. And since 2009, the Interpol stolen works of art database is open to the public. Even if it's a police database with police data, even if we don't have nominal data accessible to the public, is open to everyone. Everyone, before buying an object of art, should check against the Interpol database, but not only, of course, general public, but especially museum, the Code of Ethics, to check against the Interpol database, not only before buying an object, but also before accepting a donation, should check against the Interpol database as a minimum of due diligence its provenance. As Interpol, we are doing also several other activities. We are carrying out investigations since 1946, supporting our member countries. Since 2016, we are organizing with our other regional and international partners like Europol, UNODC, WCO, regional and global operations. We are organizing, we are participating in workshops and trainings worldwide to raise awareness among all stakeholders, of course, police and custom, how is it the situation, how to fight illicit traffic of cultural property, but also international cooperation. We are trying to improve as much as possible the international cooperation among all our international partners that are involved in this activity, as ICOM, UNIDROIT, UNODC, UNESCO, WCO, Europol, OSCE, SARPCO, only to nominate the most important that we are working with daily. And of course, since 2017, we are issuing an analysis of the crime, of the criminals, to understand how to fight illicit traffic of cultural property, and sharing this information among our main partners. And also we are innovating our tool. Indeed, thanks to the European Union, the European Commission, that is also financing and supporting this workshop, the Interpol Software Database was innovated the first time in 2018. But we are innovating again the second time. It's hope before the end of this year, but especially we show our first Interpol mobile application called ID-Art. ID-Art is not access controlled and give to all people the possibility to access the Interpol database. It means that is a mobile application in your cellular phone, in your pocket, you can have all 52,000 objects recorded as a stolen in the Interpol database. The mobile application gives everyone the ability to search against the Interpol database everywhere, anytime. The only things that you need to have is the internet connection. ID-Art is available for Apple and Android device. It means that it's a little bit different, but the activities that you can carry out the mobile application is the same. It's open to the public and to the police and to the official as well. Is in the 4 Interpol official languages: Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. And all data that are in the Interpol database are only for the public. It means that are not controlled by Interpol. This is very important. Any activity you can do with a mobile application cannot be checked by Interpol, only as a statistic, but absolutely no more. This is
sorry, you have 1 minute maximum.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marina, and sorry to be in delay. This is the logo, to the QR code to download the mobile application through the 2 devices. I invite all of you to download and to use the mobile application. As Marina, I have only 1 minute. You can make manual and visual search with the mobile application, but especially you can make object ID and site card. And all the information that you can extract from the mobile application and everything you can do, object ID and site card, can be exported as a PDF and sent to everyone through your email. Why do you should use ID-Art as a professional? To inventorize your own collections, thanks to the object ID. ICOM gave us the authorization to use the object ID to put in the mobile application. The only 2 fields that are missing are the period, the cultural environment. For the same is the rest. You can really inventorize for free your own collection. And if something happens, to extract the PDF and to send it to the police as to add the report of the theft. You can verify the provenance before buying the accepted donation, checking with the mobile application against the Interpol database. Is very, very simple, but especially, and ending, Marina, thanks, is to report information to the authority after crisis situation. Thanks to the site card, you can report damages to your museum, your building, your archaeological areas that you are in charge on. If something happens, you can crystallize what you see in front of you. You can fill in this international standard called site card, extract the PDF, and to send by email to the public authority in charge to deal with the problem of the crisis situation, that would be natural disaster, war, or terrorist attack.
Thank you,
Marina,
Corrado.
sorry for the delay.
No,
thanks
you're not.
I stop to share, and thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm losing my partners. blocking them in time, but we need to stay as much as we can. Thank you so much. And I'm sure, Corrado, that those who are listening to us will go on the website of Interpol, will download the app to know it better, because it's when you use it mostly. Corrado gave us a wonderful presentation of what it is, but it's up to you to make it real and use it. So please go download it and learn how to use it. It is like the red list. Go and make them. You have to appropriate. Organizations are giving you tools, but you have to appropriate them to understand how they can be useful. Thank you so much again, Corrado. And now we go to our last panelist. We now go even more than before in technology. We are welcoming Mr. Martin Steinbach, who is head of media security and IT forensic at the Fraunhofer Institute for Secure Information Technology. Here, I'm sure that Mr. Steinbach studied computer science at the Technical University of Darmstadt. So it's probably how it's not cultural heritage asking for technology, it's just technology adapted to cultural heritage. And Mr. Steinbach will tell you about another app, which is the Kiku app, which is being developed as a follow-up of the Illicit project, very interesting project, which sought to trace and track illicitly traded cultural objects from the Middle East. So what has been your experience with this technology so far, Mr. Steinbach, and how can professionals from different backgrounds contribute to the development of this new app, in particular, as we're talking with museums and cultural heritage context, because it's very important. You have the floor, Mr. Steinbach.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and I will start with a brief look up at what we did at Illicit. Then I briefly explain the Kiku app and show our experience so far. So Illicit was a project where we manually with partners from the museums developed lists, descriptions of objects that had an illicit background or a potentially illicit background, and in the project we found that object-based search mechanism worked quite well. So the screen you see here, this is the first line, the red lines was always the search object that we used for the search procedure. And then the other objects in the columns are the search results based by visual similarity. And you see that searching worked quite well, especially when you had objects in the library that actually were really similar. And from this Illicit, from the experience of the partners from museums and from the police, we then came to the conclusion that one should develop an application out of this, an application that allows non-experts to give a first expertise on an object. And this is what this Kiku project is now all about. So I step back just to give you an idea what Kiku is all about. This short graph shows it quite well. So we have the non-expert in the field, a police officer, a customs officer that comes across an object and now needs to decide, does the provenance sound right, or is there some potential illegal object that should be trafficked? And as he knows nothing about cultural goods and art, he needs to guess, or he needs to hold it back and get an expert. And the Kiku app now, the Kiku app should be sort of an expert that comes out of the app, out of the box. So what Kiku does, basically, you use expert knowledge that you get from museums. You train an artificial intelligence, deep learning algorithms with the knowledge. And then when you come across an object, you take a photo of the object, you send the photo as a search query into the machine learning system, and then you get back similar objects with background information. So, for example, get the information, what is the estimated time the object is from, or what is the estimated region the object is from. And this basically helps you to get an idea of the provenance document sounds right or not. And our experience where we are right now, this is an example of the application. So we have a trained system with now 150,000 objects of art. And now here on the left side, you have this matryoshka. You take a photo of the matryoshka, and then the artificial intelligence will give you back the examples that it finds in his knowledge database. And so this matryoshka is also a matryoshka from a given timeline. It's a European culture object. So you learn what this is about. And the interesting thing comes now that the artificial intelligence is really able to identify objects even if they come from unnatural angles. So it's not a 2D recognition, but a 3D recognition. So even here, the matryoshka from the back was correctly identified as a matryoshka. And then the second hit was something of similar material, of similar coloring, and the same is true for side photos. So it's a quite powerful technology to use when you need to search for similarity of objects to get a first hint about the nature, about the background of an object. And so your second question is, what can museums do to help? So artificial intelligence is always about mass of data. When you look at the huge image recognition systems that you get when you use the Google or Facebook image recognizers, they are trained with millions of objects, millions of photos. And in Illicit, we had a few thousand of objects, so recognition was not really generalized. Now we have 140,000 and it works better, but as soon as you get an unusual object where we don't have a similar object in the database, results become quite arbitrary. So the first thing that everybody who wants to assist in improving Kiko and improving the possibilities to give this tool to everybody who's in charge of making a first decision about the nature of an object is providing data. So whenever you have a photo of an object and some background object, like where is it from which time is it, it's a combination of photo and metadata. When you can provide data like this is extremely helpful at some point to increase the learning set, the training data, the brain of the Kiko app. And this is really what I wanted to bring across. And if you have questions, I'm more happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steinbach, for this short but very straightforward. But I think we all understood the importance of this tool, this app too. And thank you for explaining, or even if very briefly, how museums can contribute. Because as we've seen in the session, we talked about, we have the framework, the conventions, we have the professional codes, tools made by some organization for the museums also, and now it's with all together, because we said several times that cooperation is key. And I would like to thank all the participants to this session, and really apologize in particular with Maria, with whom I've been very bad. So I would be very happy not to conclude, but to let you conclude, to tell us if there is something. The second question you started to respond to is how a museum can efficiently fight against illicit traffic. So I thank you, all of you, and let Maria conclude this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marina, and thank you for those very interesting presentations. I will make this brief so we can go to lunch, everyone. But I think one thing that we could do as museums is translating the red lists into your language. We have been translating them to Swedish. I have them on my fridge here, some of them. And I expect that we will translate this new list for Southeast Europe next year with the help of Sophie and the team at ICOM in Paris. And one other thing that we do is we collaborate with the Swedish Police and Customs. And for example, this past month, we took part in Operation Pandora, big international operation. We are also planning to make short films with and for the police and customs to educate their staff about illegal trade. And unfortunately, we don't have an app like Kiku yet, but we have an old-fashioned email address set up with experts on different cultural objects so that the law enforcement can get in touch with and ask, what is this object? Is it okay? Or is there a problem with it? And we realize now with the new EU legislation about importing cultural goods from outside the Union, that there is a bigger need for experts on both cultural heritage, but also national legislations. And here I want to mention the UNESCO database of national legislations. I think it's a really important tool that I hope will be further developed for easier use and interpretation. And at our museum, we have a 3-step plan how to work with this question. And the first is to educate ourselves, our own staff, as well as other organizations in this business, on the UNESCO conventions, the ICOM ethic guidelines, and the global problem of illicit trafficking. It is especially important, I think, for those who meet the public, museum hosts and educators to be aware of this topic, because there is an interest out there and we have to be ready to meet that interest. And over the years, we have organized international seminars, invited cultural heritage workers from other countries like Syria and Afghanistan to talk about this topic from their point of view. These have been filmed and are available on YouTube, for example, and we're working on remodeling our webpage so you can find information about this question there, along with the translated red lists and information about the ID Art app, for example. And later this year, we're organizing a digital seminar celebrating the 51st birthday of the UNESCO 1970 Convention. We have a similar lineup like you have here today, actually, but on a much smaller scale. And the purpose of that conference is to raise awareness regarding illicit trade for organizations who have collections like museums, libraries, and churches, as was mentioned earlier. And well, if we continue collecting questionable objects, how can we expect the public to stop? So that's the focus on that seminar. And as a second step, we are planning future workshops and awareness raising activities for auction houses, antique dealers, and online selling platforms, because there is an interest among these to learn and understand more about the illegal trade. And where once it was a good investment, today it is much more insecure. And what we do here today, raising awareness about this, makes it unattractive to collect these objects. And you can't be sure that you're gonna make a profit, because maybe in the future you won't be able to sell cultural objects, quite like ivory. And also a thing that museums must do is stop hosting events involving antiquities trade, events like come here and get your objects valued. We used to do that ourselves in the past. And well, will be brief, a concluding remark. Our third step will be, of course, to bring this to the public's attention. And I would like to know if there are any good examples out there how to address this for the young people today and the children. Because I think if we want to change someone's behavior, which is really what we are talking about here, we want people to stop collecting. I think we should focus our resources on the young today. So if you have any good examples out there, so please get in touch with me. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you to this panel as well, which has been extremely rich, and we've gone a little bit over time, but it's wonderful. And I thank also our interpreters for bearing with us and being with us here still. Yes, I think it was extremely rich. Also, I want to take up what Maria just mentioned, which is the 14th of November, where you are organizing another event yourself in Sweden, which you have done last year already, for the first time that there was the International Day Against Illicit Trafficking of Cultural Property celebrated, which is now ongoing. So every year on the 14th of November, we are inviting everyone, also everyone who's here, to consider organizing events and using it for outreach activities, communication, and quite simply awareness raising. So without being too long and to come to an end for this morning session, I wish to really thank all of you for your input, for your thoughts, which is really food for thought for everyone now and also to continue tomorrow. So really thank you very much for accompanying us today for this first part of the workshop, and please come back and tune in tomorrow again at 9:30. We'll continue with a set of more sessions, very interesting ones, looking at the cooperation of museums with law enforcement agencies, and also looking at the international cooperation and education, just what Maria also mentioned a moment ago. So we'll have a moment to discuss this and come back to this. With this, thank you again, everyone, and have a good break today, and see you tomorrow at 9:30. Thank you very much.
Merci à tous.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Merci.